Tonight, we step into the damp yard of an 1870s Cadiz Cork boiler, just as the first vat begins to breathe. Settle in and let the work move slowly. The morning air tastes faintly of salt because Cadiz sits close to the water, with gulls crying over the roofs and carts creaking in from the roads beyond the city. You stand beside the boiler's brick hearth, where the iron vat is dark with old heat, and the stacked cork bark waits in rough brown slabs, curled like tired hands. The 1870s Cadiz Cork boiler knows this smell well: warm tannin, wet wood, smoke ash, and the sour edge of river water carried in barrels. Before anything can be shaped, trimmed, sorted, or sent away, the cork must soften. That is where your day begins. You take bark from the pile, feeling its ridges press into your palms, and you notice how light it seems while dry, almost deceptively light, as if the tree has left behind something hollow and calm. But once the boiling begins, that same bark drinks heat and water, and it grows heavier in a way your shoulders remember. The cork has come from cork oaks inland, from groves where men cut the outer bark in careful sheets and left the living tree standing. By the time it reaches Cadiz, it has already traveled through dust, sun, and handling, tied in bundles and jolted along roads where mule bells sound small in the morning. You don't see the quiet grove now, only the yard, the vat, the smoke, and the work waiting close enough to touch. The fire is coaxed slowly. You feed it with wood and scrap, and the flames take their time before they settle into a steady orange bed beneath the iron. There's no hurry here, because hurry wastes heat and makes poor work, and a cork boiler learns to watch the water as carefully as another man watches a clock. When steam starts to lift, it beads on your brow and dampens the front of your shirt, even before the sun is fully up. The hard part is not one great effort, it is the repeating effort. You lift, lower, press, wait, turn, and lift again, while the yard fills with the soft knocking sounds of wet cork against wood. The long pole in your hands grows slick, the vat mutters, a cartwheel passes somewhere outside the gate, and for a moment the world feels made of small, patient noises. You push the first slabs beneath the surface. They resist at first, buoyant and stubborn, wanting to rise back into the air. You lean your weight through the pole, and the hot water rolls around the cork, darkening as it pulls out dust, sap, insects, and bits of earth held from the tree's old life. The smell changes then, turning fuller and warmer, like bark after rain beside a dying fire. A cork boiler in 1870s Cadiz works with heat that doesn't announce itself all at once. It gathers around you. It enters through your sleeves, your collar, the worn leather of your shoes. The morning may begin cool, with a sea draft slipping along the stones, but near the vat your skin learns another weather. You stand in both climates at once, the outer air cool and damp, the inner air heavy with steam. When the cork is boiled long enough, you and another worker draw it out with hooks and poles, guiding each slab toward the side. This is slow, awkward work, because wet cork is soft yet bulky, and it can twist or fold if handled carelessly. You feel the pull in your wrists. You smell the iron rim. You hear water streaming back into the vat in a steady silver patter. The slabs are laid out to flatten. Sometimes weights are placed on them, or they're stacked while still warm, so the natural curve of the bark relaxes into a shape that can later be cut. You can almost feel the tree's memory loosening. The cork gives off steam in the open air, and the yard becomes clouded with a pale breath, as if the work itself is sleeping lightly. This was one reason the job was hard. It needed strength, but it punished roughness. A man could not simply wrestle the bark and be done with it, because every piece had value, and every tear or scorch might lower what it could become. You learn to be firm without being hurried. You learn to read the bend of a plank by eye, the way you might read a tired face. The cork trade around Cadiz belonged to many hands. There were cutters, sorters, haulers, merchants, clerks, coopers, and dock workers, all touching the material at different points. But the boiler stood at a quiet turning place in the process. Before boiling, the bark was raw and curled. After boiling, it was cleaner, flatter, softer, and more ready for the knives that would make stoppers for bottles of wine, oil, medicine, perfume, and ink. You may imagine the little cork stopper as light and simple, in your hand. Later, it weighs almost nothing. Yet here, beside the vat, you discover the hidden labor inside that small object, the heat, the waiting, the wet bark, the careful timing, and the quiet judgment passed from worker to worker. A cork seems modest because it has forgotten the yard that shaped it. By mid-morning, the sun reaches higher over Cadiz, and the work changes from beginning to endurance. The yard grows brighter, but not fresher. The smoke hangs lower between walls, and the damp heat gathers in the folds of your clothes. You wipe your hands on your apron, though it does little, because everything near the vat feels coated in warm moisture and fine brown residue. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler stands in a place where sea air, fire air, and bark air all meet, and none of them quite leaves. Now the routine has found its rhythm. Dry slabs wait in one stack, boiled slabs steam in another. Between them is the vat, dark and patient, with water that has taken on the color of weak tea. You listen for the water's movement, because too much fire makes it rage, and too little makes it sulk. The right boil has a living murmur, not violent, but steady enough to do its quiet work. Your hands become used to judging things without words. This piece is thick near the base. That piece is cracked along an edge. Another holds its curve too tightly and needs a longer soaking. You press with the pole, shift your stance, and feel the stones beneath your shoes grow slick where water has spilled and cooled. The job is hard because the body has to remember what the mind cannot measure exactly. There may be clocks nearby, and men may speak in minutes, but the cork itself tells you more than the clock does. You watch the swelling surface. You see whether the bark has opened slightly. You notice if the outer layer rubs clean beneath your thumb, leaving a dark stain on your skin. There is a small dignity in such watching. You are not merely standing beside a pot. You are keeping a material from being spoiled by neglect. In the soft clatter of the yard, while someone drags a stack closer and someone else sharpens a blade for later work, you become part of the cork's passage from tree bark to useful thing. The city around you moves at its own pace. Cadiz in the 1870s is a port of bells, sails, warehouses, salt, and bright stone, where ships carry goods outward and bring stories back in. You might hear a harbor whistle, or the call of a vendor beyond the wall, or the iron rim of a cart striking uneven paving. These sounds arrive softened by steam, as though the vat has wrapped them in cloth. At times, the work feels almost hidden. A passer-by may know the elegant neck of a bottle, the seal of a merchant, the taste of wine kept sound by a proper stopper, but few think of the cork boiler's wet sleeves, the aching back, the brown water, and the careful handling of bark before dawn has fully become day. You notice this without bitterness. Most useful work is hidden somewhere. Food, when it comes, is simple. Bread wrapped in cloth, perhaps olives, perhaps a little cheese, perhaps something left from home. You eat with hands that smell faintly of smoke and cork, even after wiping them clean. The bread tastes better because the work has made you hungry, and the shade feels better because the vat has made you warm. A sip of water goes down slowly, and you hear your own breathing settle. Then the pole returns to your hands. The same motion begins again. The bark slides down. The water rises around it. Steam touches your face. You lean, wait, turn and watch, and the day seems to narrow into the circle of the vat and widen at the same time, because every batch connects you to groves, roads, warehouses, ships, and tables far beyond your sight. The cork itself is a strange companion. It comes from the outer bark of the cork oak, a tree that can be stripped and still live if the work is done with care. That matters. You're handling something taken, but not from a dead tree. The bark is a renewable covering, a thick protective coat, and once removed, it begins a new life in human hands. You can feel that life in its texture. The outside is rugged and weathered. The inside is smoother, honey brown or pale tan, with tiny cells that once held air like 1,000 small rooms. This is why cork floats, why it compresses, why it can seal a bottle and spring back. You may not speak of cells in the yard, but your hands know the result. And as the morning wears on, the hardest part becomes not the lifting alone, but the patience of doing the same thing well each time. There is a temptation in repeated work to let the mind wander too far. You might think of home, rent, weather, a sick child, a debt, a festival day, a better pair of shoes. Yet the vat keeps calling you back. It calls through heat, through smell, through the small change in resistance when the cork is ready. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler learns a soft discipline, returning again and again to what is in front of him. The yard has its own language. A scrape means a hook catching the rim. A hollow knock means cork against wood. A thicker splash means someone has lowered a slab too quickly. You hear men speak in short phrases, not because they're unfriendly, but because steam and effort make long speech unnecessary. Much of the day is carried by nods, glances, and practiced timing. When you lift a finished plank, water runs from it in warm streams. It darkens the ground at your feet and curls into little channels between the stones. The smell rises again, stronger for a moment, almost sweet, almost leathery, and then it fades into the general breath of the yard. You set the plank down carefully, because rough handling at the end can spoil the patience of the beginning. The difficulty is also in the weather. In winter, your back grows hot while your fingers may still feel cold away from the vat. In summer, Cadiz can make the yard glare with light, and the steam has nowhere kind to go. You move slowly then, because haste only brings dizziness, and you learn to pace your strength the way a sailor paces water on a long passage. There are burns, of course, though we won't dwell on them. A splash can redden the wrist. A careless touch on iron can sting through the day. But the common hardship is less dramatic, more constant. The damp shirt, the sore shoulders, the smoke in the throat, the endless weight of lifting something that pretends, when dry, to weigh almost nothing. You come to know the stacks as if they were weather. The dry pile smells dusty and woody, with a sun-baked scent from inland roads. The wet pile smells deeper, darker, and more alive. The flat pile promises later work, trimming, sorting, cutting, and perhaps shipment. Every stack is a stage in the same slow transformation, and you stand at the warmest stage of all. There is pride in that, not loud pride, just the kind that rests in the hands. When a slab comes out clean and pliant, when it lies flatter than before, when the foreman says nothing because nothing needs saying, you feel the satisfaction of a small thing done properly. You may not own the warehouse, the shipment, or the profit, but you own the steadiness of your work. By midday, the light in the yard turns white, and the cork boiler's world becomes a place of glare, shade, and steam. You move toward the shaded wall when you can, but the vat remains the center. The iron holds heat with stubborn patience, and even when the fire is banked for a while, warmth presses outward from it. Your sleeves are damp, your collar clings, the palms of your hands feel roughened by bark, pole, rope, and the small grit that seems to live everywhere in the yard. A cork boiler in 1870s Cadiz does not work alone, though the task can feel inward. Men pass behind you with bundles. Someone counts pieces in a low voice. Someone stacks planks edge to edge, arranging them so air can move around them. A boy carries water, watching carefully, because every trade begins with looking before doing. You see yourself in that watching, perhaps from years before. The process is simple when explained, but demanding when lived. Cork bark is boiled to clean it, soften it, and make it easier to flatten. The heat expands the material and reduces some of its harsh curl. Later workers can cut more evenly from a prepared plank than from raw bark. But simple steps can still ask much of a body, especially when they repeat from dawn until the light begins to leave. The vat must be filled, fed, watched, emptied, and filled again. The fire must be kept strong, but not wasteful. The cork must be submerged, but not battered. The boiled slabs must be lifted, but not torn. Each instruction sounds plain, and each one becomes 100 small decisions when your arms are tired and the yard is wet underfoot. You begin to notice the workers by their habits. One man always taps his hook twice against the rim before lifting. Another hums under his breath. Not a full song, just a little phrase that rises and disappears. Someone keeps a scrap of cloth tied around his wrist. Someone always chooses the same shaded place for bread. These are small anchors, and in hard work, small anchors matter. The city beyond the yard keeps breathing. Church bells mark the hours, though they may lag behind your sense of time. The harbor smells of tar, salt fish, rope, and damp canvas. If the wind turns, that smell comes over the wall and mingles with cork and smoke. You breathe it in, and for a moment the whole working city seems present in one mouthful of air. Cadiz has known trade for centuries, and by the 1870s it carries old habits alongside new ones. Steamships may appear near sailing vessels. Warehouses hold goods from many regions. Clerks write in ledgers while men in yards carry the weight of the entries on their backs. You, by the vat, belong to this broad movement. Though your day is measured in planks rather than pages, the cork might become a stopper for sherry shipped from nearby wine districts, or for oil, medicine, or household bottles. It might travel farther than you ever do. You may imagine it crossing water, tucked in crates, silent and small, while your own evening ends within walking distance of the same streets. This is not sadness, exactly. It is the strange reach of ordinary work. When you return to the vat after eating, the first wave of heat feels sharper. The body had cooled just enough to notice. You bend to the task, and the steam closes around you again, soft but insistent. The pole slides in your grip. The bark rolls under pressure. Your boots shift on damp stone, and you find the old stance without thinking. The hardest jobs are sometimes those that give no grand sign of progress. A wall rises stone by stone, and a field changes color when cut, but cork boiling leaves behind stacks that still look like bark. The difference is quieter. It lies in pliancy, cleanliness, shape, and readiness. You learn to respect changes that do not shout. And when the afternoon begins to lean westward, the work becomes a lesson in staying careful after the body wants ease. The light softens a little, and shadows lengthen along the walls of the Cadiz courtyard. For a while, everything seems gentler. The glare drops. The stones cool at the edges. Even the steam looks less harsh, turning gold where the sun catches it. But you know this hour can fool a worker, because tired hands make mistakes just when the day appears to relax. The 1870s Cadiz Cork Boiler must keep attention in the shoulders, the eyes, the grip, and the soles of the feet. You shift a plank, and it catches. You ease it free rather than wrenching it. You lower another into the vat, and it tries to rise, buoyed by the air still held inside its little chambers. You press slowly until the water accepts it. There's a rhythm now that feels almost like breathing. The fire draws in air. The water lifts steam. The cork rises and is pressed down. You inhale smoke, salt, and damp bark, then exhale into the warm yard. Work and weather seem to share one pulse, and you follow it because following is easier than fighting. A rough plank may show where the outer bark has cracks or insect channels. You notice these, not as flaws to complain about, but as messages from the tree's years. Rain, drought, wind, cutting, transport, storage, all of it leaves marks. Your job is not to erase the history of the bark. It is to make it usable without wasting what can still serve. Sometimes a merchant or overseer steps through, cleaner than the men at the vat, and looks over the piles with a quick eye. He may ask how many batches have passed. He may pinch a softened piece, nod, and move on. You return to the water. The visit changes little, except perhaps the mood for a few minutes, as voices lower and backs straighten. Most of the day belongs to the workers. It belongs to the sound of wood feeding the fire, the slap of wet cork on boards, the clink of metal hooks, and the soft hiss when water touches a hotter stone. It belongs to ordinary endurance, the kind that rarely enters ledgers, though every ledger depends upon it. You feel that truth in your arms. The cork boiler's clothes carry the trade home. Even after washing, there may be a faint smell of smoke and bark in the cuffs. Your hair may hold the day's steam. Your hands may be stained in the lines of the skin, and a child might sniff them and say they smell like the yard. You smile, perhaps, because the work follows you softly, even into rooms where no vat stands. In the afternoon, speech often grows quieter. Men conserve strength. The boy carrying water has stopped staring and begun to move with more purpose. A cart arrives late, with more bark than anyone wanted to see at that hour, and the pile grows again near the wall. You look at it, and then you look away, because the task in front of you is enough for now. This is another hardship of the job. Work comes in stacks. It waits visibly. It doesn't hide its amount. You can see the unboiled bark leaning there, curled and dry, while your own body asks for evening, yet the cork boiler learns not to carry the whole pile in his mind. You carry one plank, then one more, then another. That habit is a kind of mercy. You don't finish the whole world. You finish the piece in your hands. The vat receives it. The water does its slow work. You lift it out changed and place it where it belongs. There are many trades across many centuries that teach the same lesson under different roofs and different smells. The Cadiz air moves a little cooler as the sun lowers, and the yard begins preparing itself for the last stretch of labor. The final batches of the day have a different feeling, not easier exactly, but more inward. The men know the remaining work by sight. The fire is judged for what is left, not for the whole day. You add fuel carefully, because too much is waste and too little leaves the last cork poorly done. Evening asks for thrift as well as strength. The vat's surface is darker now. It holds the memory of many slabs, and the water smells richer, almost bitter, from bark and heat. You stand close enough to feel the damp warmth on your face, and far enough to keep your balance. The pole has become an extension of your arms. Its worn places fit your grip, and the smoothness of them tells of many days before this one. An 1870s CADIZ Cork boiler might not have written much about his work, and perhaps no one asked him to describe the exact feel of boiled bark. But we can stand beside him in imagination, close to the brick hearth, and notice what the ledgers forgot. The drag of wet cork, the shine of water on stone, the smoke-softened voice of a man asking for the hook. The process continues, because useful things often come from repeated motions rather than grand invention. Cork must be prepared before it can serve. The bottle stopper must seal without crumbling. The sheet must flatten before cutting. The material must be respected for what it is, light but stubborn, soft but resilient, simple to see and complicated to handle well. When the last full stack of boiled planks is arranged, steam rises from it in fading waves. You can see the edges settling. Some pieces lie flatter already, while others still hold a curl that will need weight and time. The yard smells of hot bark, wet dust, ash, and cooling iron. Somewhere beyond the wall, evening feet pass over stone, and a door closes with a wooden sound. Your body knows the day now. It knows the ache behind the shoulder blades. It knows the stiffness in the fingers. It knows the relief of leaning the pole aside, even for a moment. Yet there is also a calm that comes after repeated work, when the mind stops reaching forward and rests in what has been done. A cork boiler's hardship is not only heat, weight, and dampness. It is being close to transformation while remaining almost invisible. The cork changes because of your care, but the finished stopper will not carry your name. It will sit in a bottleneck, clean and pale, perhaps opened at a table where no one imagines the steam yard in Cadiz. Still, the work has its own witness. The other men know. The foreman knows, in his way. The material knows, if a material can be said to keep memory. And you know, because your hands have touched every stage, from rough dry bark to warm pliant plank, and that kind of knowing doesn't need an audience. The evening bell, when it comes, does not end everything at once. Tools must be rinsed. Hooks must be leaned where they won't trip a tired foot. The fire must be lowered, watched, and left in a proper state. The ground must drain where water has gathered. The stacks must be arranged for the next hands, the next process, the next morning. You move through these last tasks slowly, not from laziness, but from the carefulness that tired work requires. The hook is set against the wall. The pole is wiped and laid aside. A stray piece of bark is lifted from the stones. The vat still murmurs faintly, holding heat longer than the body wishes, as if the day itself is reluctant to cool. And as dusk settles over Cadiz, the corkyard becomes quieter, though nothing in it feels empty. The walls hold the warmth a little longer than the air does, and when you pass your hand near the bricks, you can feel the stored day resting there. The vat is no longer roaring, but it still gives off a faint breath, soft and metallic, with the smell of dark water caught inside it. You step around puddles that reflect the last light. and the sky above the yard has turned the pale blue of washed linen. In this hour, the 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler begins to belong less to labor and more to memory. The stacks stand where you left them, damp and obedient. Each plank of cork holds a dull sheen on its surface, and if you press a finger against one, it yields slightly before rising back. That spring is the point of so much work. It is what lets cork seal a bottle, cushion a package, float a net, or protect some fragile thing in transit. You can feel usefulness waiting inside the material, though it still smells like bark and smoke. A man closes the yard gate slowly, because even gates have a sound at evening. The hinges complain, then settle. Somewhere a donkey shakes its harness, and the little metal fittings ring softly in the dusk. You hear footsteps outside, voices going home, a woman calling to someone across a narrow street. Cadiz is not asleep, not yet, but its workday is loosening, and you loosen with it. Your hands are tired in a particular way. They do not simply ache. They feel as if they have been listening all day, listening through rope, pole, bark, heat, and water. The fingers still hold the shape of the work after the work is done, curling a little as if another plank might need lifting. You rub one thumb across the other palm, and the skin feels rough with a fine brown stain. The cork boiler's evening is not the evening of a man untouched by his trade. Your shirt carries the yard. Your boots carry ash and wet dust. Your hair carries smoke so faintly that you may notice it only when you bend your head in a smaller room. Yet there is comfort, too, in carrying proof of the day, because it means the hours did not pass unused. As we follow the 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler away from the vat, the city receives him with cooler air and stone underfoot. The streets near the working yards are narrow enough to hold smells from many trades at once: salt fish, damp rope, horse sweat, oil, bread, and the warm breath of cook fires beginning behind doors. You walk among them slowly, with the heaviness of one who has earned the right not to hurry. The harbour wind moves through the corners and touches the wet places on your sleeves. Cadiz in the evening has a sound that belongs to water, even when you cannot see the bay. Rigging knocks against masts. A gull calls once, then again, farther off. A cart rolls over uneven stones with a tired wooden rhythm. You may pass a warehouse where clerks are still finishing entries by lamplight, their pens scratching down the journey of goods that other hands have lifted, boiled, pressed, counted, and carried. For the cork boiler, those ledgers are distant things. He may not read every line that decides the value of a shipment, yet his labor sits inside the numbers. A bundle listed as prepared cork means hours of steam and wet bark. A consignment of bottle stoppers means men who stood near vats and fires before the cutters ever touched the softened planks. You know this with your body, and there is no need to say it aloud. At home, or in a room shared with others, the first pleasure may be water, not meant for boiling. Water in a basin is cooler, kinder, and it takes the dust from your hands without asking anything back. You lower your fingers into it and watch the surface darken slightly. The smell of cork rises again as the skin warms and loosens. It is a small private echo of the yard, a quiet sign that the day is still leaving you. The meal is plain, because working men often eat what is possible rather than what is imagined. Bread, beans, perhaps fish, perhaps a little wine, perhaps a stew kept warm near the hearth. You taste salt and smoke and the soft earthiness of food that fills rather than delights. If someone asks about the day, you may answer with a few words, because the work was much the same as yesterday, and much the same as it will be tomorrow. That sameness is not emptiness. In life shaped by repetitive work, sameness can be shelter. You know where your hands belong at dawn. You know the weight of the pole, the height of the vat, the smell of water when the bark begins to give up its tannin. The world may shift in ports, and markets and politics, but the cork must still be boiled before it can be cut. When night settles more fully, the body begins its own sorting. The shoulders find their ache, the wrists remember twisting against buoyant bark, the lower back speaks softly when you stand from a chair. These are not grand complaints, only the body's bookkeeping. Each small soreness records a movement made many times, and in that record you can almost trace the whole day backward. The room grows dimmer, and the sounds outside become softer. A footstep passes. A door bolt slides. The wind brings a trace of salt through a crack or window. You lie down with the feeling that the vat is still somewhere nearby, warm in the dark, cooling slowly under the same sky. Even away from it, the 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler may dream in steam, planks, hooks and brown water. Before sleep comes, there may be thoughts of the trees inland. You may never have stripped the bark yourself, but you know the cork did not begin in the yard. It began on thick-trunked cork oaks, under a harder sun, where the outer bark was cut with careful axes and eased away in slabs. The tree, if treated properly, would grow another covering over years, and this slow return gave the trade its rhythm beyond any single man's day. That long rhythm is part of the hardship. A cork boiler works by the hour, but the material comes from years. He handles the patient growth of a tree in the quick demands of a yard. If he spoils a plank, he spoils time as well as bark. So you learn to be careful, because the work behind you is longer than your own shift, and the work ahead depends on what you leave behind. And when morning comes again, before the city has fully opened its eyes, the Cadiz Cork Boiler returns to the yard where the stacks wait in the grey light. The air before sunrise feels almost tender after the heat of yesterday. The stones are cool. The gate is damp. The vat stands black and still, with a faint mineral smell rising from its rim. You enter quietly, as workers do when the day has not yet found its voice, and for a few moments, the yard seems to belong to the objects more than to the men. Pole, hook, bucket, bundle, brick, and plank wait with patient familiarity. You check what was left overnight. The boiled cork has settled under its weights, or in its stacks, flatter than before. Some slabs have lost their harshest curl, and their surfaces show where heat softened the grip of the outer bark. You lift an edge and feel the difference. It is subtle, but your hands know subtle things. The plank is less wild now, more ready for sorting and cutting. Morning preparation begins with small tasks that set the whole day's pace. Ash must be cleared enough for the fire to breathe. Water must be brought or checked. The vat must be filled to the level the work requires. The dry cork must be moved close, but not so close that steam and splashing will wet it too soon. These little arrangements save strain later, and a careless morning can make a long day longer. The fire accepts kindling first, then larger wood. You crouch near the hearth and smell cold ash, dry splinters, and the first thin smoke. When flame catches, it makes a small inward sound, almost like a whisper. You feed it slowly. The heat has to be built, not commanded, and any man who works near boilers, ovens, kilns, or vats learns that fire is best treated as a stubborn helper. Other men arrive by degrees. One coughs as he enters. One carries bread tucked under his arm. One says nothing, only nods, still half inside his own sleep. Their boots scrape on stone, and the yard becomes human again, not loudly, but in layers. You feel the small comfort of shared routine, because the work is hard enough without having to explain it each morning. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler depends on this shared timing. One man cannot do the work smoothly alone for long. The bark must be shifted, held, lifted, stacked, weighed and carried. Even silence has cooperation inside it. A glance can mean lift now. A shoulder turning can mean the path is clear. A hand resting on a plank can mean, wait, it is not ready. As the water warms, steam gathers at the surface and then vanishes in the cool air. The first hour is always a return to sensation. The pole fits the palm again. The iron rim looks dark and damp. The bark smells dry and dusty before it goes in, then deeper and sharper as heat reaches it. You remember the day before, but your body still has to begin again. The raw cork itself is uneven. No two slabs are quite alike. One is broad and smooth on the inner face. Another is narrow, ridged, and stubbornly curled. Some pieces carry dirt in their creases. Others have spots where weather or insects left small marks. You learn not to resent the unevenness, because trees do not grow for the convenience of human hands. That is part of what made the work hard. Industrial process often asks natural material to behave evenly, but nature arrives with bends, scars, thicknesses, and surprises. The cork boiler stands between those two worlds. You take bark shaped by seasons and prepare it for knives, bottles, crates, and trade. You do not erase its nature. You persuade it, with water, heat, weight, and patience. When the first batch enters the vat, the day truly begins. The cork bobs up, as cork always wants to do, and you press it down with steady force. The water darkens slowly around it. Steam dampens your face. The smell opens, warm and earthy, with a faint bitterness that clings to the back of the throat. You feel the plank shift beneath the pole, then settle lower. A younger worker may try to force a piece too quickly. You see the movement before the mistake finishes. A quiet word stops him, not sharp, not angry, just enough. In this work, saving a plank can be as simple as saying, "Wait." You show him where to press, closer to the curve, letting the heat do more of the labor and the arms do less. That teaching happens in fragments. No one stops the yard for a lesson. You learn by watching, by failing a little, by being corrected, by feeling the difference between bark that is ready and bark that only looks ready. An 1870s CADIZ Cork boiler carries knowledge that may never be written down, though it lives clearly in the angle of his hands. By the time the sun clears the nearby roofs, the yard has warmed into its working self again, and the smell of boiling cork reaches into the street. People passing outside may catch only a trace of it. To them, it is one working smell among many, another sign that the city is making, moving, feeding, repairing, and selling. To you, the smell has layers: fresh bark, old water, ash, iron, damp stone, hot wood. You can tell when the vat needs attention, partly by scent, because neglected water and overheated residue speak before they are seen. The process asks for a balance that is easy to overlook. Cork must be boiled enough to clean and soften, but the worker must avoid handling it so roughly that the edges crumble or split. The best pieces might be destined for bottle stoppers, where soundness matters. Lesser pieces can still serve other uses, but waste is noticed. Every damaged plank means less useful material from the same precious bark. You work with tools that are plain and honest. A long wooden pole, darkened by wet hands. Iron hooks with worn handles. Boards for stacking. Weights for flattening. Buckets, ropes, wedges, and the heavy architecture of the vat itself. Nothing seems delicate, yet delicate judgment moves through all of it. A rough tool in a patient hand can do careful work. There is a warm rhythm when two men lift together. Hook catches, pole guides, weight shifts, water runs. The plank comes free in a slow arc, dark and shining, then lands on the boards with a wet, hollow sound. You both step back for a moment as steam rises around your faces. The air smells strong enough to taste, and the taste is bitter, woody, and strangely comforting once it has become familiar. Not all hardship comes from pain. Some comes from monotony, asking to be respected. The cork boiler repeats the same motions so often that the mind might try to escape, but the work rewards staying present. If you drift too far, the plank slips. If you rush, it tears. If you forget the fire, the water loses its strength. The trade teaches attention by making care useful. The morning grows noisier after the first batches. More carts arrive. A delivery of dry bark is untied near the entrance, and the slabs lean together with a dry rustle like thick paper. Dust rises from them, catching the sunlight. You sneeze once, wipe your nose on your sleeve, and return to the vat. Even that little interruption has a place in the rhythm. Cadiz lives around water, and the cork boiler's work mirrors the port in a smaller form. Goods arrive rough and bundled. They are opened, treated, sorted, and sent onward. The city is always receiving and releasing. In the yard, the vat becomes a small harbor of its own, with bark arriving dry and departing changed, each piece making a quiet passage through heat. The workers speak of weather, prices, family, tools, and sometimes nothing at all. A man may mention that a ship is due. Another may say the inland roads were dusty that week, and the bark came in dirtier than usual. You listen, because such comments are part of the trade's knowledge. Weather in the groves becomes dirt in the bark. Dirt in the bark becomes darker water. Darker water changes the day beside the vat. That is how a cork boiler learns to connect distant things. Rainfall, transport, storage, market demand, fuel cost, and labor all meet at his hands. He may not use grand words for any of it. He may simply say this batch is rough, or this wood burns poorly, or the water needs changing sooner today. Yet inside those plain observations is a working map of the whole process. As the morning deepens, the first prepared planks are carried away for later sorting, and we follow them just long enough to understand what your boiling has made possible. Beyond the vat, the cork enters another quieter stage. The planks lie flatter now, their surfaces cleaner, their curves softened enough for inspection. A sorter may turn them over, judging thickness, grain, cracks, and soundness. A cutter may imagine the small cylinders that could be taken from the best parts. The boiler's work is no longer visible as steam, but it remains in the way the knife can enter the material. You watch this now and then from your place near the vat. It is good to see what follows. Without that, the boiling might feel like an endless middle with no shape. But when a worker trims a softened plank more easily, or when a sound piece is set aside for fine stoppers, you can see the result of the heat you tended. The satisfaction is plain, and it steadies you. Cork for stoppers must be chosen with care. A bottle asks for a seal that compresses, holds, and does not spoil what it protects. Wine, medicine, oil, and scent all depend on that modest cylinder doing its work without boasting. In the 1870s, before screw caps and modern plastics, cork held a common place in daily life. It was small, but it was everywhere. That commonness could make the labor behind it disappear. People notice a stopper mostly when it fails. When it works, it vanishes into usefulness. You might say the same of the cork boiler. If the cork is well prepared, no one far away thinks of the vat in Cadiz. They simply open a bottle and find the contents kept sound. There is peace, sometimes, in making things that serve quietly. The world needs many such things: seals, handles, hinges, stitches, pegs, lamps, lids, and all the unseen work that keeps daily life from spilling apart. You stand beside the vat and become part of that hidden usefulness. Your hands ache, but they have helped make something reliable. The sorter may cut away damaged edges. The poorer scraps are not always useless. They might be ground, packed, burned, or saved for lesser purposes. Depending on the workshop and the market, waste still happens, but working people tend to notice anything that might serve twice. You learn to see value in fragments, because the day's pay is made from material that has traveled too far to be thrown aside lightly. The best planks are kept with care. They may be stacked in a drier place, away from muck and careless feet. Their color shifts as they cool and dry, from dark wet brown toward warmer tan. If you run a hand over one, you can feel the tiny unevenness that later tools will address. It is not finished, not yet, but it has passed through its first transformation. Then your attention returns, because the vat does not wait for admiration. Another dry slab is ready. Another batch must be lowered. The fire has changed while you looked away, and you feed it before the boil weakens. The work is generous only when you keep tending it. You step back into the steam, and the day closes around you again. When noon approaches again, heat gathers in the enclosed yard, and the Cadiz Cork Boiler must work inside both weather and fire. The sun strikes the wall and bounces down into the stones. The vat sends heat upward. The fire sends heat outward. The body becomes the meeting place of all these warmths, and sweat moves under your shirt even when you stand still. You breathe through your mouth for a while, because smoke has thickened near the hearth, and the air tastes of ash and bark. A cloth at the neck helps a little. A hat helps outside the steam. Water helps most, though it never feels like enough for long. You drink slowly, because a belly full of cold water can sit heavily while you bend and lift. The habits of the yard are practical, learned by discomfort and passed on without ceremony. You do what lets you continue. This is where the job's hardness becomes ordinary. Not a single trial, not a story someone tells for excitement, but a steady pressure that fills the hours. The heavy wet cork, the hot rim, the smoky air, the slippery stones, the need to keep judgment clear while the body asks for shade. You feel each part, and still the next plank must be moved. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler works in a period when many industrial tasks still depend directly on muscle and attention. Machines may assist in some places, and factories may grow more organized. But in yards like this, much remains hand, eye, heat, and timing. The human body is still the instrument that notices, adjusts, lifts, and endures. You are not separate from the process. You are one of its working parts. Yet this does not make the work cold or mechanical. Quite the opposite. Because the body is so involved, the work is intimate. You know the vat by its sounds. You know the fire by its smell. You know the cork by touch. You know the workers by the space they take beside you. The process is industrial, but it is also deeply human. At midday, the city sounds thinner in the heat. Fewer wheels pass. Voices carry differently, slower and flatter. Somewhere, a metal cup is set down on stone. Somewhere, a dog barks once and gives up. Inside the yard, the loudest thing is the wet movement of cork and the slow draw of the fire beneath the vat. You let those sounds guide your pace. If a batch is especially thick, it asks more from everyone. The slabs resist the water, turning awkwardly, pushing up under the pole. You lean with your shoulder, not just your arms, and another man helps from the opposite side. For a few moments the work becomes a quiet contest of patience. Then the cork yields, and the water folds over it with a heavy, satisfied roll. You do not celebrate. You breathe. That is enough. The small victory is stored in the body as confidence for the next difficult piece. Trades are built from such stored moments, not from speeches. A hand learns because it has succeeded before. A worker keeps going because the task that looked stubborn has yielded, and the next one probably will too. The hardship also lies in pay and dependence, though we keep our voice gentle around it. A cork boiler's work supports trade, but he may have little control over prices, shipments, or demand. If orders rise, the yard grows busier. If fuel costs shift, someone complains. If bad bark arrives, the labor becomes harder. You stand close to commerce, but not above it. Still, the day itself offers small freedoms. The way you set your stance, the care you give a plank, the shared joke under the breath, the choice to teach the younger worker without humiliating him, the private pride in finishing a hard batch cleanly. These are not grand freedoms, but they are real ones, and working people have always made room inside narrow circumstances. After the meal, the yard slows for a little while, and even the vat seems to speak in a lower voice. You sit where shade touches the wall, and the stone behind your back feels firm and cool through damp cloth. The bread in your hand is simple, but its crust has a dry crackle that feels almost luxurious after the wet work. You chew slowly. You taste smoke on your fingers, salt in the food, and the faint bitterness of cork that has followed you no matter how carefully you wiped your hands. The other men rest nearby. One stretches his legs. One closes his eyes without sleeping. One talks about a cousin working near Jerez, where barrels and wine make their own kind of labor. You listen without needing to answer. Rest in a workday has its own etiquette. No one fills every silence, because silence itself is part of the meal. From the street comes the sound of a seller calling softly, then moving on. A breeze slips over the wall and stirs the steam drifting from the stacked planks. For a moment, the yard is almost tender. The rough bark, the black vat, the hooks, the ash, the weary boots, all of it sits in the same mild light. You feel how even hard places can become familiar enough to soothe. The cork boiler's thoughts may wander then to the uses of cork beyond the bottle. Cork floats, cushions, insulates, and resists water in ways people have valued for centuries. Fishermen use it. Households use it. Makers and merchants find purposes for offcuts and scraps. In every use, the material's lightness matters, and that lightness begins in the tree's structure, though the worker knows it best by feel. You pick up a small dry scrap from the ground and turn it between your fingers. It is rough on one side and smoother on the other, light enough to seem almost absent. Then you look at the steaming pile and think, perhaps without words, how strange it is that such a light thing can make such heavy work. The truth of a material is not always visible when it is finished. The rest ends gradually. No bell may be needed. Someone stands. Someone lifts a hook. Someone checks the fire. You fold the remaining cloth around your food and place it aside. The body protests for a breath, then remembers its pattern. You return to the vat, and the afternoon begins with the first renewed push of the pole. The water accepts the next slabs with a softer sound than in the morning. because the surface is already dark and hot. Steam wraps your forearms. The sun has shifted, leaving part of the yard in shade, and you work along the boundary between brightness and relief. This changing light is one of the few ways the day announces its progress. The tasks themselves remain much the same. And as the afternoon lengthens, we begin to notice the smaller discomforts that made the Cadiz Cork Boiler's work quietly demanding. The eyes tire from steam and glare. The throat dries from smoke. The ears grow used to noise until silence later feels almost strange. The skin of the hands softens from water and roughens again from bark, a cycle repeated within the same day. Your feet ache from standing on stone. The smell of boiled cork settles so deeply into the air that you stop noticing it until the wind changes. None of these things alone would define the work. Together, they make the day. A trade is often known by its collection of small burdens, repeated until they become part of a person's posture. You can recognize a cork boiler, perhaps, by the way he stands near heat, by the way he judges weight before lifting, by the way his hands close around a pole without hesitation. There are moments of awkward humor too, though never sharp. A slab escapes pressure and bobs up stubbornly, splashing everyone near it. A man mutters at it as if the bark has chosen mischief. Someone laughs once, tired but genuine, and the sound passes through the steam like a small, clean bell. Workplaces hold these mild moments because bodies need them. A cork boiler in 1870s Cadiz cannot remain solemn all day. Calm does not mean joyless. The men know the work is hard, but they also know the exact foolishness of a plank that refuses to stay underwater, or a hook that catches a sleeve, or a boot that finds the same puddle twice. These little things lighten the load without denying it. The material itself keeps teaching humility. Cork is buoyant because it holds air in tiny spaces, and that useful quality is precisely what makes boiling awkward. The same nature that lets it float a fishing net or seal a bottle makes it resist submersion in the vat. You press down on its future usefulness before that usefulness can be shaped. The job is hard because the cork's virtues resist the worker at first. You learn to work with that resistance. Instead of fighting straight down, you angle the plank. Instead of forcing one edge, you let heat soften it and press along the curve. Instead of trusting strength alone, you trust sequence. Many old trades carry this wisdom. The material tells you how it will cooperate, if you stay patient enough to listen. The fire has its moods as well. A green piece of wood smokes too much. Dry scrap burns fast and asks for feeding. Ash gathers where air should pass. You clear, feed, wait, and watch. The vat's water responds slowly, because heavy things do not change at once. A careless worker might overcorrect, but you have learned that heat, like tiredness, must be managed gradually. Late afternoon brings a softer color to everything. The cork piles turn warmer in the slant light. Steam becomes visible in long ribbons. The whetstones shine in patches, and the iron rim of the vat catches a dull red gleam from the fire below. You notice these things because the day is no longer new, and the mind begins looking for gentler places to rest while the hands continue. In this hour, the Cadiz Cork Boiler may feel both used up and steadied. The body is tired, but the routine is familiar enough to carry him. The next lift will be like the last. The next plank will resist and then yield. The next stream of water will run off the bark and strike the boards below. There is comfort in knowing the shape of what remains. As evening approaches again, the work bends toward order, and the yard begins turning labor back into arrangement. The stacks must be made sensible. Boiled cork cannot simply be dropped anywhere. It needs air, pressure, space, and protection from careless damage. You and the others shift planks into straighter piles, aligning edges as well as the irregular shapes allow. The wet surfaces slide slightly against one another, and the smell rises each time a piece is moved. It is warm, woody, and a little sour, like a rain-soaked forest floor beside a fire. Weights are checked. Boards are adjusted. A warped piece may be placed where pressure will help it flatten. A cracked one may be set aside, not forgotten, but marked in the mind for lesser use. Sorting begins even before formal sorting begins. The worker's eye is always classifying, because handling a piece is also a chance to understand it. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler has to leave the next stage in good condition. If the stacks are careless, tomorrow's cutters suffer. If the cork dries badly, value is lost. If the yard is left cluttered, morning begins with irritation instead of rhythm. Good workers often show themselves most clearly in how they leave things for others. You see this in the placement of a hook, the clearing of a path, the neatness of a pile. The younger worker asks where to put a group of thinner pieces. You point with your chin, because your hands are full. He carries them carefully, perhaps more carefully than he did in the morning. That is how a trade enters a person. Not all at once, but through 100 corrections that become invisible. By evening, he is still learning, and so are you. In the humble way experienced hands always keep learning. The fire is lowered by degrees. You do not abandon heat suddenly. The remaining fuel is managed so it does not waste itself. Coals settle into a red bed, and the vat begins its long cooling. Steam thins. The air clears enough that you can smell the sea again. Faint but welcome. Salt returns to the edge of everything, reminding you that Cadiz is never far from water. There is a moment when the yard seems to exhale. The loud labor has ended, though the small tasks continue. A bucket is moved. A board is rinsed. A rope is coiled. Someone scrapes residue from a place where it will be harder tomorrow if left alone. These closing motions matter. They are the soft stitching that keeps one day tied properly to the next. Your hands, after so much wet work, feel oddly dry when the heat fades. The skin tightens. A knuckle stings where bark opened it earlier. You flex the fingers slowly and feel the pull along the palm. A little oil or fat at home might ease them, if there is any to spare. For now, you wipe them clean as best you can and keep moving. The cork piles continue to steam after the men have stepped away. That lingering warmth gives the yard a dreamlike quality. The material seems alive, breathing out the day it has absorbed. You watch the vapor rise and vanish into the evening air, and you understand, without needing to make a lesson of it, that many changes continue after the visible work is done. When the gate opens to let the workers out, the street feels cooler than expected, and the city's evening receives the smell of cork from your clothes. You walk with a slower step tonight. Perhaps the second day has settled deeper into the body. The shoulders are not surprised anymore, but they are tired. The sound of your boots on stone is steady and unhurried. Lamps begin to glow in windows, and the sky above Cadiz holds a last pale band over the harbour. Somewhere, a church bell folds the hour into the air. The life of the cork boiler is tied to ordinary thresholds. Yard to street, heat to breeze, work clothes to home clothes, if he has them. Speech with men to quiet with family, or quiet alone. Every evening asks the body to cross back from industrial rhythm into household rhythm, and that crossing can take time. You may sit for a while before saying much. You may simply listen to spoons, footsteps, and distant voices. If you share a table, the day may be present in small ways. Someone notices a burn mark. Someone asks whether the new bark came in clean. Someone says the weather will turn. These are not grand conversations, but they hold the fabric of life. Work enters home through the body, and home steadies the body for work. The two are separate, yet joined like two sides of the same plank. Night in Cadiz brings its own textures. The plaster walls release the heat of the day. The air smells of lamp oil, cooking, salt and stone. A breeze moves through narrow streets and carries pieces of other lives with it. A baby fussing, a chair moved, a low laugh, the closing of shutters. You hear them while your own hands rest, and the world feels large but near. The cork boiler may think of money, because working people often must. Pay has to cover bread, rent, fuel, clothing, repairs, and all the little needs that arrive without asking. A sore day's work becomes coins, and coins become food, and food becomes the strength to return. The circle is plain. It can be tiring, yet within it are meals, sleep, companionship, and the small pride of keeping a household moving. There is also the uncertainty of trade. Cork depends on harvest, transport, demand, and the wider market for bottles and goods. A good season inland may fill yards. A poor one may thin the work. A busy port can keep many hands occupied, while a slow period makes every worker listen more closely for news. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler lives close to these changes, though they may arrive as rumors before they arrive as facts. Still, sleep comes because the body has earned it. The bed may be simple, the room may be shared, the pillow may hold the faint smell of soap, dust, and tired hair. You lie down and feel the day loosen joint by joint. The vat is gone now, not gone from memory, but far enough away that its heat no longer reaches your skin. The last thing you hear may be the city, breathing softly through the dark. And with another dawn, the work opens again, not as a new story, but as the next turn in the same patient wheel. The yard is damp when you arrive, and a thin mist clings to the lower stones. It may be sea air, or leftover steam, or both. The stacks from yesterday stand in better order now, cooler, flatter, and less fragrant. You pass them with a worker's glance, noting what has improved and what will need attention. The cork has continued changing while you slept, which is one of the quiet wonders of the trade. Today, the bark from a different shipment waits near the wall. It is darker, thicker in places, and dirtier along the outer ridges. You can see bits of earth lodged in the cracks. This means the water may foul sooner. It means more brushing, more watching, more judgment. You run your hand along one slab and feel the roughness catch at the skin. The day has already introduced itself. A Cadiz Cork boiler in the 1870s cannot expect perfect material. He works with what arrives. Inland cutters may have done their job well, but roads are dusty, storage is imperfect, and every bundle has its own history. The city receives the bark as it is, not as the workshop might wish it to be. You begin where the material begins. The fire is lit again. Smoke climbs the wall before the draft takes it. Someone jokes softly that the smoke knows the way better than the men do. You smile because the line is old, or because it feels old enough to be comforting. Repeated work gathers repeated sayings, and even worn phrases can be useful when morning is cool and the first heat has not yet reached the hands. The rougher bark asks for more preparation before boiling. Loose dirt is knocked away. Pieces are sorted by thickness where possible. A slab with a bad split is set aside, because boiling may open the damage further. You and the others work through the pile with the calm practicality of people who know that careful beginning saves trouble later. The sounds are dry at first, knocks, scrapes, rustles, and the low scrape of bark against stone. When the water reaches strength, the first rough pieces go in. They darken quickly. Mud and tannin cloud the surface. The smell is stronger than yesterday, less sweet and more earthy, with the deep odor of old bark and wet soil. You press the slab down and feel grit through the pole as it rubs the vat's side. The work has become messier, but not unfamiliar. This is another reason the job was hard. The same title, Cork Boiler, could mean different days depending on the bark, the fuel, the water, the weather, and the people beside you. Routine did not remove variation. It only gave you a way to meet variation without being startled by it. You learn steadiness not because every day is identical, but because every day changes in ways you can handle. The water has to be watched more closely. If it grows too foul, the cork may not clean properly, and the later work suffers. Changing or refreshing water is labor in itself. Heavy, wet, and inconvenient. No one does it for pleasure. Yet a bad vat wastes more effort than a careful change. And experience teaches the difference between tolerable darkness and water that has lost its use. You look into the surface and judge by color, smell, and the feel of the bark coming out. A clerk might want a measure, a number, a fixed rule. The yard gives you signs instead. Brown is not always too brown. A bitter smell is not always bad. Sediment matters, but so does temperature. You hold these variables in the body as much as in the mind. The younger worker asks whether the water should be changed after this batch. You tell him after this one, perhaps. Let it finish first. He nods and watches the surface with new seriousness. He is learning that industrial work often means waiting long enough to make a better decision. Not delaying from laziness, but waiting because the material has not yet finished speaking. By mid-morning, the yard is thick with steam again, and the rough bark has made the work heavier than before. Wet dirt clings to the boards. The stones near the vat are streaked brown. Your sleeves are darker from splashes, and the smell of the yard has deepened into something almost like peat and smoke. You adjust your footing carefully. A slip need not become a story. it can simply bruise the hip and make the rest of the day worse. So you place each step with the attention tired workers give to ordinary hazards. The first water change, when it comes, slows everything. The vat cannot be treated as if it were a little kitchen pot. It is heavy, hot, awkward, and built into the labor of the yard. Water must be drawn, drained, baled, or shifted according to the setup, and every method asks for effort. Steam rises thickly as the level lowers. The smell becomes sharper near the bottom, where residue has gathered. You help with buckets or channels, whatever the yard uses, and the work feels different from boiling. More stooping, more carrying, more splashing against the legs. The water is hot enough to demand respect and dirty enough to make every spill unpleasant. You move slowly, because this is not the kind of task that improves with rushing. The vat empties by degrees, and the yard seems to pause around it. When cleaner water is added, the first sound is hollow, then fuller as the level rises. The iron accepts it with a deepening tone. Fresh steam lifts, lighter in smell, and for a few minutes the air feels almost renewed. You stand back and breathe through your nose. The difference is clear. Clean water has a gentler scent, and the next batch will show whether the effort was worth it. It usually is. The cork comes out brighter, less muddied, more itself. The inner face shows warmer color beneath the softened surface. A man nearby says that's better, and no one needs more praise than that. In a yard where words are saved, a simple judgment can carry a good deal of satisfaction. You feel it settle in the chest like a small, warm coal. The Cadiz Cork Boiler is tied to cleanliness in a practical way. Not cleanliness as polish or display, but cleanliness as usefulness. Dirt in cork can dull tools, spoil surfaces and lower quality. Boiling loosens what the bark carried from grove and road. It is washing, cooking, softening, and preparing all at once. You become, in this way, a keeper of transitions. The work also has a smell that marks the boundary between raw and prepared. Dry bark smells of tree and dust. Boiling bark smells of heat and release. Flattened cork smells milder as it cools. Later, cut cork has a cleaner, lighter scent, almost airy when fresh. If you have spent years in the trade, these smells become a kind of calendar, telling where each piece stands in its journey. And as the day moves toward noon, the work returns to its steady pattern, but your understanding of it has deepened by another small degree. You press another slab under the surface, and this time you notice the curve differently. You imagine the tree trunk it once covered, the way it wrapped around living wood, the way men cut vertical lines and eased the bark away. The curve is not a nuisance only, it is evidence. You are handling a piece of a tree's old circumference, and the vat is teaching it to lie flat for human use. That thought may not stay long. The body has other concerns. The plank slips. The pole must be shifted. Someone calls for help. Yet the thought leaves a trace, and sometimes traces are enough. Working people often carry deep knowledge in brief flashes, between one practical need and the next. There is no lecture in the yard, but there is understanding everywhere. At noon, the bread tastes of smoke again. The shade feels earned again. The city sounds slow again. You sit with your back to the wall and watch steam rise from today's rough bark, now softened and stacked in better order. The piles look less hostile than they did at dawn. You can see the day's progress in their posture. They lean less wildly. They seem willing now. A man speaks of the inland harvest. Another says the trees must not be cut too soon, or the bark is poor. This is true enough. Cork oaks need years between strippings, and impatient cutting can harm both tree and trade. The cork boiler may not manage the groves, but he feels the result of good or poor practice in the vat. Too thin, too uneven, too damaged, and the work grows harder. The meal ends, and you return to the vat with the afternoon ahead, carrying in your body the knowledge that the day is only partly spent. The fire has been kept low, but alive. The water waits, darkening again. The rough bark pile has shrunk, though not enough to satisfy tired arms. You choose the next slab because choosing one is better than staring at all of them. Work resumes with the quiet obedience of habit. You lower, press, wait, and turn. The pole's end disappears beneath brown water. Steam beads on your eyelashes. A drop runs from your hairline to your jaw. You taste salt, smoke, and the bitterness of bark. The body is not comfortable, but it is capable, and capability can be its own form of calm. In the afternoon, a breeze comes over the wall and shifts the whole yard's mood. Steam moves sideways. Smoke clears from the hearth. The smell of the harbor arrives. Tar, rope, fish, and open water. Everyone seems to breathe more easily for a few minutes. You lift your face slightly, not stopping, just receiving the air as it passes. Small reliefs are not small when the day is long. The breeze also cools the wet cork too quickly in places, so stacks are adjusted. Boards are moved. A few pieces are covered or weighted differently. The work never becomes pure rest, even when the weather offers kindness. Every change asks for a response. A good worker accepts this without resentment, because attending to change is part of the craft. The rough shipment continues to reveal itself. Some pieces improve wonderfully after boiling, showing sound inner cork beneath dirty outer ridges. Others remain poor, cracked, or uneven. You learn not to judge too soon. Heat can redeem a piece. It can also expose weakness. The vat is honest in that way, and by afternoon, the yard knows more about the shipment than it did at dawn. That honesty is hard but useful. A merchant may hope. A cutter may prefer fine material. A worker may wish the pile were easier. But after boiling, the cork shows more of what it is. Your task is to bring it to that point with as much care as the day allows. Then others will judge, cut, sell, or set aside. You have done the part that belongs to steam. As the sunlight lowers, the younger worker handles a plank well, easing it out without tearing the softened edge. You notice and give a small nod. He sees it, and his face changes only slightly, but enough. Approval in a yard like this is rarely embroidered. It is a nod, a word, a silence without correction. Such things can stay with a person longer than praise shouted across a room. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler may have learned the same way, years earlier, from someone now old, absent, or gone. Trades pass through gestures. A stance is copied. A grip is corrected. A sense of timing enters the hands before the mouth can explain it. You are part of that chain whenever you show someone how to press without breaking, how to wait without wasting, how to lift without fighting the whole weight alone. Evening comes again with a feeling of earned repetition. The rough pile is smaller, the prepared stacks are larger, the vat is darker, and the fire is lower. Your clothes are stained more heavily than yesterday, but the day's work has brought stubborn bark into better order. There is no grand ending, only the ordinary evidence of effort arranged in piles across the yard. And while the last batch steams under the fading light, we stay beside the Cadiz Cork Boiler a little longer, because the closing of a hard day is also part of the work. The last pieces often ask for the most care. Tiredness makes hands impatient, and impatience can undo good labor. You remind yourself, perhaps without words, that this plank deserves the same attention as the first. It came from the same living world. It will pass to the same later hands, so you press it gently under the water, holding it there while the steam softens its curl. The yard has become quieter around you. Some tasks are finished. Some tools are already resting against the wall. The boy with the water bucket moves more slowly, but still moves. A man near the stacks rubs his lower back, then bends again to adjust a board. Everyone is near the end, and because of that, everyone must be careful. The work's final hour has its own discipline. The last plank comes out shining. Water pours from its edge in a warm sheet, then breaks into streams. You and another worker carry it to the stack and lay it where pressure can reach it evenly. It settles with a wet sigh. Steam lifts around your hands, and for a moment you cannot see the boards beneath it. Then the vapor thins, and the plank is simply there, part of the day's finished work. Tools are rinsed again. The pole is checked for splinters. The hooks are leaned with their points turned safely inward. Ashes drawn back. Coals are settled. The vat, no longer fed, keeps its heat like an old memory. You stand near it for a moment, feeling warmth on your legs and cooler evening on your shoulders. The body notices contrast before the mind does. The rough day leaves the yard dirtier than before. so more cleaning is needed. Muddy residue is scraped from a channel. Wet bark fragments are gathered. A board is turned to dry. These tasks lack the clear drama of boiling, but they protect tomorrow from today's disorder. You have learned that leaving a place ready is a kindness to your future self. A cork boiler's life is full of such small kindnesses. A tool placed properly, a path cleared, a fire banked with care, a younger worker corrected before he hurts himself or spoils the plank. None of these gestures is large enough for a song, but together they make the trade livable. You take them seriously because you know how hard a day becomes when they are neglected. The gate opens again. Outside, the evening street waits with its cooler air, its voices, its smell of food and salt. You step through with the others, and the yard remains behind, holding stacked cork, cooling iron, damp stone, and the faint red heart of the fire. It will be there in the morning. That knowledge is both a burden and a comfort. As we walk away, the sound of the harbour grows clearer. Water taps against stone. Rigging knocks softly. A sailor's voice travels and fades. The city lamps have begun to glow, and their light sits gently on the uneven walls. Your body is tired, but the pace of walking cools you. Each step carries you farther from steam, and yet the work remains close in the smell of your sleeves. The next morning, before the first batch, there will be another kind of labor waiting. The labor of inspecting what yesterday's boiling has done. The prepared cork is cooler now, and its color has settled. You run your fingers over the surface and feel places where the heat opened the grain, places where dirt came free, places where cracks widened. The yard is quieter in this early hour, and inspection has a softer mood than boiling. It asks for eyes more than shoulders at first. You turn each piece slightly, letting dawnlight show what lamplight might miss. Some planks have flattened well, others need more weight. A few may require another treatment, though no one chooses extra boiling lightly, because every added handling costs labor and can change the material further. You judge thickness with thumb and finger. You listen to the faint sound a plank makes when set down. Good cork has a certain dry promise even before it is fully ready. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler may share this inspection with sorters, because boundaries between tasks can blur in smaller yards. You may not be the final judge, but your opinion carries weight when it concerns the boil. You know which pieces fought the water. You know which came out clean. You remember the difficult batch, the dirty shipment, the plank that nearly split. The material's recent history is still in your hands. Morning light shows the yard without romance. Stains on stone, ash by the hearth, bark dust in corners, watermarks on boards. Yet there is beauty in this plainness, because everything has a reason. The marks are not decoration. They are evidence of work repeated until the place itself has learned the trade. You stand inside that evidence and feel, perhaps, that you belong. A new shipment may not arrive until later, so the first part of the day gives more time to preparation and sorting. This is not rest, but it uses the body differently. You lift planks from one stack to another. You set aside pieces by thickness or quality. You carry flattened slabs toward the cutter's area. The air smells less of steam and more of drying cork, dust, and old wood. The cutters work with knives and gauges, depending on the products needed. Their hands are quick in a way that differs from yours. Where you use heat and pressure, they use edge and measure. You watch a blade enter the softened cork more cleanly because of yesterday's boiling, and that simple sight gives the previous day a shape. Your work has made their precision possible. A fine stopper requires sound material. The cutter avoids cracks, pits, and weak edges. He turns the plank, reads it, and takes what the cork can give. Offcuts fall softly, making almost no sound compared with the vat. The smell here is lighter, cleaner, and a little sweet. You can breathe more easily, though fine dust may tickle the nose. You may help carry cut pieces to trays or bins, where they wait for further finishing. Each little cylinder looks modest, almost too small to justify the heat that came before, but you know better. You see the whole path inside it. Tree, road, bundle, yard, vat, stack, knife, tray. A cork stopper is a small object with a long shadow behind it. The hard part of being a cork boiler is partly that your stage sits early in the chain, Early work is often hidden by later polish. By the time a stopper is smooth, clean, and fitted into a bottle, the boiling has disappeared from sight. Yet if the boiling was poor, the flaw might remain forever. Many trades share this quiet burden. When done well, they vanish. When done poorly, they are blamed. There is humility in accepting that. Not the humility of being unvalued, but the humility of serving the material and the process. You do your part so the next part can happen. The cutter does his part so the merchant can sell. The stopper does its part so the bottle can keep what it holds. Work moves forward through trust, one careful hand after another. By mid-morning, the new bark arrives after all, tied in bundles and smelling of dust, sun, and the road inland. The cart comes through the gate with its familiar creak, wheels darkened by old mud and iron rims flashing where stone has polished them. The mule flicks an ear. The driver climbs down slowly, stretching his back before touching the ropes. You smell the shipment before it is untied. Dry cork, road dust, animal sweat, and the faint green memory of trees far from the sea. Everyone's attention shifts. New material changes the day at once. The bundles must be counted, opened, and stacked. The quality must be judged. The space in the yard must be rearranged to receive them without blocking paths. Work that seemed orderly becomes fluid again, and you move with it, clearing boards, shifting a pile, making room near the wall. The bark falls open in slabs when the rope is cut. It makes a thick, papery sound, deeper than leaves, lighter than timber. Dust lifts and hangs in the sun. You cough once, then laugh softly with another man who does the same. The dry outer ridges scratch the skin as you carry them. Compared with wet cork, the slabs seem light, but their awkward shapes make them tiring in another way. A Cadiz Cork boiler learns that weight is not only heaviness. Shape has weight, bulk has weight, heat has weight, repetition has weight. A dry slab may weigh little, yet carrying many dry slabs under a rising sun can wear the arms and back. Later, when water enters the material, the weight changes again. The body keeps accounts more honestly than any scale. The driver speaks of the road. He says the inland dust was fine as flour this week. He says one bundle shifted near a bend. He says the men at the grove cut from trees that had waited long enough, so the bark should be good. You listen while your hands work, because such talk may matter. It tells you what to expect when the slabs meet the vat. The new bark looks promising. Thick, but not too wild. Rugged outside, sound within. A few pieces carry cracks, as all shipments do, but most seem worth careful handling. You feel the quiet lift in the yard when material is good. Good bark does not make the work easy, but it makes effort feel well spent. There is a difference, and workers know it keenly. Soon the vat is called back into full service. The fire grows, water warms. The new slabs wait, their dry faces catching light. You take the first one and feel its curve press against your forearm. It smells of warm dust and tree bark, a smell drier than the yard, almost like hills beyond the city. For a moment, the inland world enters Cadiz through this one rough plank. You lower it into the vat, and the transformation begins again. The dry bark darkens at the edges first. Steam curls around it. Air escapes in small bubbles, each one breaking the surface with a tiny sound. You press gently, letting heat enter the material. The plank resists, then eases. Good cork has its own kind of cooperation, and you can feel it in the pole. By noon, this new shipment has changed the whole mood of the yard, and the work feels hard in a cleaner, more hopeful way. The water darkens, but not as quickly as with the rougher bark. The smell is warm and woody, with less mud in it. The slabs come out pliant and strong, their inner faces showing a pleasant brown. You stack them with care, aware that these may yield good stoppers later. Even tired arms respond to promising material. The work remains work, but the mind meets it more gladly. The younger worker notices it too. He says these lie better. You nod and show him how to place one under the board, so pressure falls evenly along the curve. He adjusts it, then steps back to see. Learning includes the pleasure of noticing improvement. When material behaves well, it teaches more clearly, because the result of careful handling is easier to see. The meal tastes better in such a day. Though it may be the same bread and olives, satisfaction seasons plain food. You sit in the shade and look across the yard at the neat stacks of good cork steaming gently. The smell of them mingles with the harbor breeze. Your hands are sore, your shirt is damp, and still there is a settled feeling in the chest. The morning's effort has met material worthy of it. A man speaks of the bottle makers and wine merchants who will need fine cork. Another mentions that some stoppers may travel north or across the sea, depending on orders. You imagine the pieces moving outward from Cadiz, hidden in crates, carried into shops, cellars, kitchens, and apothecaries. The little cylinders may be touched by hands speaking languages you do not know. Your work will travel quietly. This thought is not grand enough to disturb the calm. It simply widens the yard for a moment. The vat remains before you. The bread remains in your hand. The sun remains on the wall. Yet the work, small as it appears, connects to a world of ships, bottles, tables, shelves, and stored liquids waiting behind cork to be kept safe. After the rest, the afternoon asks again for effort. Good bark still must be boiled. Fine material can still be spoiled. In fact, it may ask for more care, because the loss of a good plank is felt more sharply. You return to the vat with renewed attention. Not faster, not more tense, just more aware of what the pieces might become. The fire is steady now. The water holds a strong boil. The pole moves in your hands with practiced ease. The sounds arrange themselves around you. Bubbles, footsteps, plank against board, hook against rim, gulls above the roofs, and distant wheels outside the gate. The day becomes almost musical, though no one would stop to name it so. Work has its own low rhythm, when many hands know their parts. The hardship remains, but it is softened by competence. You know how to stand, you know how to lift, you know when to ask for another hand, you know which pieces need patience and which can be moved along. The task is still demanding, yet it no longer feels like confusion. That is one of the gifts of long practice. It does not remove labor, but it removes some fear from labor. As the afternoon light turns warmer, the prepared stacks grow high enough to cast small shadows of their own. You pass between them and feel steam on both sides, as if walking through a narrow weather made by the day's work. The cork surfaces glow in the slant light, ridged and irregular, each piece showing the pattern of the tree it came from. You touch one lightly and feel warmth still held inside it. The material cools slowly, and so do you. The cutters will be pleased with much of this shipment. You can already imagine it. Fewer complaints, cleaner cuts, better yield. The foreman may say as much, or he may only look at the stacks and remain quiet. Silence can be approval when nothing needs correcting. You have learned to read that kind of silence, because trades often speak by what they do not interrupt. A cork boiler's relationship with the foreman may be practical more than tender. The foreman watches output, fuel, quality, and time. You watch water, bark, fire, and your own strength. These concerns overlap, but are not identical. Some days there is friction, some days there is ease. Today, with good bark and steady work, the yard feels aligned, and no one needs many words. The evening tasks begin before evening fully arrives. A smart worker prepares the close of day, while there is still strength and light. You shift dry bark away from wet areas. You straighten boards. You make sure the last batches are chosen sensibly, not leaving the most awkward pieces for the hour when everyone is tired. This is planning at the scale of hands and backs, and it matters. The final good slabs go in, one after another. Each one resists, yields, darkens, and softens. The repetition becomes soothing even through fatigue. You almost know the next movement before it happens. The pole lowers, the water folds, the steam lifts, the hook catches, the plank rises, the boards receive it. Around and around, the process turns, steady as a mill wheel. By the time dusk reaches the yard again, the stacks of good cork stand in orderly rows, and the day has the calm heaviness of work completed but not finished forever. The fire is lowered, the vat cools, the tools are set aside. You and the others move through the familiar closing tasks with less strain than after the rough shipment, perhaps because good work leaves a cleaner feeling behind it. Your body is still tired, your hands still ache, but the mind rests more easily when the material has answered well. You pause near the best stack and press your fingertips against the top plank. It is warm, damp, and springy. Beneath the roughness, there is promise. You may never see the finished stoppers from this batch, but you can imagine them clean and pale, lined in trays, counted into sacks, sent away. That imagining is enough. A worker often lives with partial views of finished things. The yard darkens by degrees. Shadows gather under carts and along the wall. The last steam from the stacks thins until it can be seen only where the light catches it. Someone closes a shutter in a nearby building, and the sound falls into the evening, like a small wooden note. You breathe in, and the air feels cooler, though the smell of cork remains close. Leaving the yard tonight, you feel the shape of the day behind you, not as a story with an ending, but as a set of motions the body still carries. Lift, press, wait, turn, draw out, stack, and return. These motions have entered your muscles. They will fade in sleep, then return at dawn. This is the way of repeated work, not a circle that traps, but a rhythm that holds. The street outside has taken on the blue of evening. Lamps glow. A child runs past and is called back by a voice from a doorway. The harbor wind comes cooler now, moving the smell of the sea through the smells of cooking and animals and stone. You walk slowly, and each step releases a little heat from the day. Your hands hang open at your sides. And somewhere behind you, in the closed yard of Cadiz, the cork continues to settle under its weights, flattening in the dark while the city turns toward night. In that dark, the planks lose heat more slowly than a person does, and their warmth lingers under boards, stones, and weight. The steam no longer rises in visible clouds, but moisture remains in the cork, moving inward and outward through tiny spaces too small to see. By morning, the curve will be gentler. By morning, the bark will have accepted a little more of the shape the yard has asked of it. You are not there to watch it, yet your day continues in the material. This is one of the quieter facts of the cork boiler's work. Not everything happens while the hands are moving. Some of the labor is in setting conditions, then trusting time. You boil, stack, wait, and leave the planks properly, and the night does its share. A careless stack works badly through the dark. A careful stack improves without sound. The 1870s Cadiz Cork Boiler learns that unseen hours can either help or punish him. At home, you sleep with that hidden process going on across the city. The yard cools. The iron vat settles. The coals fade under ash. The cork slowly flattens, and the wet surfaces breathe into the night air. Meanwhile, your own body repairs itself in a simpler way, loosening the hands, easing the back, letting the ache become duller. Work rests in wood, bark, muscle, and stone alike. When dawn returns, the city has not yet become bright. Cadiz is pale at the edges, with the sea lying somewhere beyond the roofs like a quiet sheet of metal. You walk back before the day grows loud, and the soles of your shoes find familiar hollows in the street. Your body knows the route even when your mind is still soft from sleep. The smell of the yard reaches you before the gate is fully open. Inside, the stacks wait with a changed presence. They are cooler now, darker in the deeper cracks, lighter across the lifted faces. You remove a board and hear a faint tacky sound where damp cork releases from damp wood. The plank beneath has relaxed. It still remembers the tree, but less fiercely. You run your hand along it and feel the slow success of work that happened while no one watched. The first task is to examine, not to boil. This changes the morning's mood. You and the other men move from stack to stack, lifting edges, turning pieces, checking for cracks that opened during cooling. Some slabs have flattened cleanly. Some have warped sideways. Some need to be placed again under pressure. The yard smells milder at this hour, more like wet bark drying in shade than like the full heat of the vat. An 1870s Cadiz Cork Boiler has to remember yesterday's handling as he looks at today's planks. This one came from the cleaner shipment. That one resisted the water. Another had a weak edge before it went in. Such memory is practical. It helps decide what can be trusted, what should be watched, and what might be lost if treated roughly in the next stage. You keep these small histories without writing them down. The cutters come near as the light improves. Their knives are wrapped, sharpened, or carried with ordinary caution, because a sharp tool is both helper and threat. They look over the prepared cork with quiet interest. Good boiling makes their work smoother. Poor boiling leaves them fighting curl, dirt, and stubbornness. You can read their faces when they lift a plank. You know, before they speak, whether the batch has pleased them. A cutter turns one slab, presses his thumb along the inner face, and gives a small nod. That nod belongs partly to the tree, partly to the cutter, partly to the boiler, and partly to the night's slow pressure. Work rarely has a single author. You feel the satisfaction anyway. Your hands ache less when the material answers well. The morning grows easier because yesterday's care has returned as evidence. Soon, though, the vat must wake again. There is always more bark. The fire is prepared while inspection continues, and the yard divides itself into two rhythms, one of looking and one of heating. You help with both, moving between the cooling stacks and the black iron rim. The smell of ash thickens as the hearth is cleared. The first smoke climbs, blue and thin, then gathers strength. The new day's bark is not as fine as the last shipment. It has more curl, and the outer ridges are rougher. You touch it and feel resistance before it even reaches the water. This is how the morning tells you what kind of day it may become. You do not resent it. You simply adjust your expectations, because the cork boiler's patience begins before the boiling does. As the fire grows, the yard fills with the softest order of preparation, and we stay beside the Cadiz Cork Boiler as the first difficult pieces are brought forward. These planks are awkward. Their curves are tight, almost tube-like in places, because the bark held close around the tree. When you carry one, it turns in your arms and catches against your apron. Dry edges scrape your wrist. Dust slips from a crack and lands on your shoe. The plank weighs little, but it takes up space like a larger thing, and that is another kind of burden. You set it near the vat and study it for a moment. Where should it enter first? Which curve will fight the pole? Where might it split if pressed too hard? This looking does not take long, but it saves effort. A cork boiler learns to solve part of the task before the hot water begins. Good work often starts in the pause before movement. When the piece goes in, it tries to rise immediately. You press one edge, then shift to the center, letting the water climb over the bark in stages. Steam comes up around your hands and face, and the smell deepens, sharp and woody. The plank rocks under the pole, unwilling but not impossible. Another man takes the far side with a hook. Together you guide it down until the boil can do what strength alone cannot. The hard part is knowing how much force belongs to the moment. Too little, and the cork floats uselessly, barely touched by heat. Too much, and a valuable piece may crack along a weakness hidden in the ridge. You feel that uncertainty in the pole. It is not fear exactly. It is a living attention. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler has to hold firmness and restraint in the same hands. The water darkens around the stubborn slab. Small bubbles appear along the ridges and then break free. Dust loosens. Old bark softens. The curve eases by a fraction. You feel it. The pole no longer pushes against quite the same resistance. This slight change is enough to tell you the heat has entered. You keep it submerged, breathing slowly, while the vat murmurs and the morning warms. Nearby, the cutters work through yesterday's good cork. Their knives make soft, regular sounds, not loud but clear. Shavings fall in little curls. The contrast is pleasant in a working way. Behind you, heat and wet bark. Ahead, dry cutting and cleaner shapes. The cork's journey is visible across the yard, and you stand at its steamiest, heaviest passage. A boy carries the smaller offcuts to a bin. His arms are full, but the pieces weigh almost nothing. They bounce against one another with a dry whisper. You glance over and see what your labor becomes after several more hands have touched it. The rough bark of yesterday is now being divided into useful pieces. The sight steadies the effort at the vat. By mid-morning, the stubborn batch has softened enough to move more easily, but the work has already taken more from the shoulders than a kinder batch would have. This is how a day grows hard without changing its name. On paper, the task remains boiling cork. In the body, no two batches are the same. A tightly curled shipment adds strain to every lowering and lifting. A dirty shipment thickens the water. A wet day makes the ground slick. A hot day makes the steam feel doubled. The title is simple, but the living work is full of variations. The Cadiz Cork Boiler must also live with the timing of others. The hauler arrives when he arrives. The sorter needs what he needs. The cutter waits or complains according to the state of the prepared stacks. The foreman counts batches and fuel. You stand at the center of several needs, while the vat keeps its own pace. Water cannot be rushed beyond heat, and heat cannot be argued into good judgment. Someone asks if the next lot can be hurried. Perhaps an order is expected. Perhaps a cart must leave later. You listen, then look at the cork, not at the person asking. The bark answers the question more truthfully than any schedule. It will be ready when its curl eases and its surface cleans. You can work steadily, but you cannot make poor timing into good cork. There is no defiance in this, just the plain authority of experience. Workers who handle materials often know limits that merchants prefer not to hear. A cork boiler can add fuel, shift pieces, and organize labor, but he cannot change the nature of cork. The material grants progress under certain conditions, and your skill is in keeping close to those conditions, not pretending they do not exist. The request to hurry passes. Maybe it returns later. For now, the vat continues at its proper pace. You and the others lift a softened plank, and hot water sheets from it in a shining rush. The piece is heavy with moisture, and its curve has relaxed. You guide it onto the boards. It lands with a sound like a damp drum, low and satisfying. Your shoulders feel the cost of the morning. They have worked against buoyancy, awkward shape, and heat. You roll them once when no plank is in your hands. The movement brings a little relief, but not enough to erase the ache. Work does not need to be dramatic to be demanding. Sometimes it simply asks the same muscles for the same answer too many times. A breeze from the harbor enters the yard and carries away some smoke. Everyone notices without saying much. The air clears. You can smell the sea more plainly, and with it tar, rope, and perhaps fish from a nearby stall. The steam thins for a moment, revealing the vat's surface, dark and shifting. Then the wind changes again, and the cork smell returns to fill the space. As noon approaches, we move with the work into the small rituals that keep a long day from fraying. Water is poured for drinking. Bread is unwrapped. Someone rinses his hands, though the smell of bark remains. You sit where the wall gives shade and stretch your legs carefully, because sudden stretching can awaken aches that were sleeping under the rhythm of motion. The stone beneath you is cool in one place and warm in another. You shift until the body finds a tolerable arrangement. The meal is not separate from the work. It is part of how the work continues. You eat slowly, listening to the yard settle. A cutter sharpens a knife with a soft scraping sound. A cart horse stamps outside the gate. Someone counts planks in a low voice. The vat still holds heat, and its faint murmur reaches you like a distant kettle. Even at rest, the cork boiler remains near the day's center. The talk turns to fuel. Good dry wood burns cleanly, but fuel costs money and must be used carefully. Poor fuel smokes, smolders, or burns too quickly. A cork boiler knows the difference in his eyes and throat. If the fire struggles, the whole yard slows. If too much fuel is fed, the cost is noticed. Heat, like labor, has to be managed with care. In a port city, fuel may come through several hands before it reaches the yard. Scrap wood, old packing, proper firewood, whatever the workshop can obtain and afford. Each kind burns differently. You learn which pieces give steady heat, which flare and vanish, which smoke enough to make the eyes water. This knowledge seems humble, but it shapes the day as surely as the quality of the bark. The younger worker listens to the talk, chewing quietly. He is learning that the job is larger than the pole in his hands. Cork boiling depends on bark, water, fire, space, weather, timing, strength, and money. A weakness in any one can be felt at the vat. You watch him absorb this, not all at once, but enough for today. Every trade is a web before it is a routine. After eating, the first motions are always slow. You stand, test the back, flex the fingers, and return to the hearth. The fire needs waking, the water needs checking. The next slabs wait, curled and dusty, indifferent to whether you are ready. You take the pole again. Its handle is warm from the morning and dark where many hands have polished it with use. The afternoon begins with a batch of mixed thickness. Thin pieces soften quickly. Thick ones ask longer. If boiled together carelessly, some become overworked while others remain stubborn. So you sort as you go, grouping what can share time. It is not exact, but it is better than treating all bark alike. The cork boiler's eye becomes a scale, a ruler, and a memory. This sorting slows the work at first, then saves it later. You hold a slab upright and judge its edge. You compare it with another, then place it in a different pile. The action is simple, but repeated many times. Dust touches your sleeves, bark catches under a fingernail, the sun leans into the yard, and the air grows thick again. You return to the vat with pieces that belong together. The boil takes them more evenly. Thin slabs relax without being punished. Thick slabs have enough time. The finished stack looks better than it would have if haste had ruled the hour. No one praises the sorting directly, but the cutters will notice. The material will notice. Tomorrow's yield will notice. Much good work is recognized only by the trouble that never happens. And as the afternoon settles into its long middle, the Cadiz Cork Boiler's attention turns toward the body's limits and the quiet ways workers protect themselves. You shift your stance often, not from restlessness, but from necessity. 1 foot forward for pressing, both feet wide for lifting, a step back when the water runs, a turn of the hips before carrying, so the back does not take all the strain. These habits may not be taught formally. They grow from soreness, from watching older men, and from learning which movements leave you able to work tomorrow. Hands are protected only so much. Gloves, if used, can become wet, stiff, or clumsy near hot water. Bare hands feel more and suffer more. You learn where to grip the pole, how to avoid the iron rim, how to set a plank down without catching the fingers underneath. Small burns and scrapes are part of the trade, but careful workers do not invite them. They simply understand that care reduces what it cannot remove. The face takes the day too. Steam opens the pores. Smoke stings the eyes. Sun warms one cheek while the other faces shade. By evening, the skin may feel tight with salt and soot. You wipe your forehead with a cloth that is never truly clean after the first hour. The cloth smells of sweat, cork, and ash, which is to say it smells of the day honestly. A cork boiler cannot escape breathing his workplace. Every inhale carries some part of it. Warm tannin, damp bark, fire smoke, harbor salt, dust from dry slabs. It is not a single smell, but a changing mixture, and your body learns to live inside it. When you step away at evening, the air outside may feel startlingly open, as if the chest has found more room. The older men know when to pause for a breath without appearing idle. They adjust a board, they check a hook, they step to the side and study a stack. In those small pauses, the body recovers just enough. A trade survives not only through strength, but through the wisdom of using strength sparingly. You learn this lesson slowly, because youth often mistakes effort for skill. The younger worker, eager to prove himself, pulls too hard on a heavy wet plank. You see his shoulder rise in the wrong way. Before the strain becomes injury, you take part of the weight and tell him to turn his feet. He flushes, then adjusts. The plank comes down safely. Nothing more is said. Instruction in a yard can be as brief as a breath, and just as necessary. This too was hard about the job. It was not only making cork ready, it was making yourself last. A man who spent all his strength by noon harmed the day. A man who ignored pain could lose weeks. The work demanded a steady body across years, not one grand display. So you learned economy, posture, timing, and the humility to ask for another hand. Late afternoon brings a cart for taking prepared cork onward. The arrival changes the yard again. Men shift from boiling to loading, from vat rhythm to carrying rhythm. The planks must be moved without undoing their flattening. They are stacked carefully, tied or arranged according to where they are going next. The cart bed smells of old wood, rope, dust, and faint animal warmth. You carry several planks with another man, each piece still holding a little dampness. The weight is not terrible, but the awkwardness remains. Edges bump the forearm. A drop of water runs down your sleeve. The cart creaks as the load grows. The mule shifts and snorts. Outside the gate, the street waits to take the cork into another part of the city's working body. A prepared plank leaving the yard carries more than material value. It carries the choices made over several days. How long it boiled, how it was stacked, how it was weighted, whether it was protected from dirt after cleaning, whether it was handled by tired men with patience or thrown down in irritation. Every object has a history of treatment, even when no one later can see it. The cart driver tightens the rope. The load settles. A few small pieces are tucked where they will not fall. He clicks his tongue and the mule leans forward. Wheels turn, first reluctantly, then steadily. The prepared cork leaves the yard, moving toward cutters, merchants, or storage. You watch it go for a moment, feeling the faint release that comes when work passes into the next keeping. Then the vat calls you back. The day is not done because one cart has gone. There is still bark waiting. There is still heat to use while the fire is good. You return to the pole, and the familiar warmth folds around you again. Work in such places is always both finishing and beginning. Something leaves, something enters. The middle remains full. As evening nears, clouds gather over the city, and the first hint of damp weather changes the feel of the corkyard. Cadiz knows moisture well, but rain complicates outdoor work. The air grows cooler, and the smell of stone rises before the first drops fall. The dry bark must be protected. The stacks must be checked. A sudden shower can wet what should remain dry, dilute ash, slick the ground, and make every movement slower. You look upward, then toward the piles, and the yard adjusts without needing many words. Boards are shifted under cover. Tarps or cloths, if available, are pulled over dry stacks. Prepared cork is moved away from places where runoff might reach it. The work becomes urgent in purpose but still calm in movement, because panic only tangles ropes and drops planks. You carry cover and arrange, feeling the air press closer before rain arrives. The first drops strike dust and release a smell as old as roads. Dry bark gives off a sharper scent where moisture touches its outer ridges. The stones darken in round spots that spread and join. A man curses mildly at a rope knot, then laughs at himself. You help loosen it, and together you pull the cover into place. Rain begins properly, not heavy but steady enough to matter. The vat continues under the rain. Steam rises through falling drops, and for a while the air becomes a mingling of waters, hot water lifting, cool water descending. The sight is strangely soothing. The sound changes too. Rain ticks on wood, taps on iron, softens dust, and whispers against the stacked covers. The fire must be watched more carefully, sheltered from drips where possible, fed with fuel that will keep burning cleanly. A cork boiler in 1870s Cadiz works with weather as a daily partner. The job may be industrial, but it is never sealed away from the sky. Wind changes smoke, rain changes footing, heat changes endurance, damp changes storage. The yard is a workshop and a weather instrument together, and you read both because both shape the cork. The rain cools your face while steam warms your chest. Your sleeves, already damp from work, become damp from the sky. The distinction hardly matters after a while. Water runs from the edge of your hat. The stones grow slick, and you shorten your steps. Every lift is slower now. Every turn carries a little more caution. The job is hard not because one thing becomes impossible, but because many small things become less forgiving. You finish the batch already in the vat, because leaving it half done would waste the heat and the material. The plank comes out shining under rain and steam, darker than usual, beautiful in a plain working way. You and another man carry it to a sheltered stack, where it lands with a wet sound among its companions. The cover is drawn back just enough, then closed again. The foreman decides the remaining dry bark can wait. No one argues. The fire is lowered sooner than usual, and the day bends toward protection instead of production. You feel relief, but it is not simple. Stopping early means less done. Continuing carelessly would risk more. Work often asks for such balances, and the best choice may still carry a cost. Closing the yard in rain takes longer. Tools slip in wet hands. Ropes swell. Ash turns pasty. Water gathers in shallow places and must be guided away from stacks. You move through it all slowly, with rain tapping your shoulders and steam fading from the vat. The world smells washed, but not clean exactly. It smells of wet ash, cork, stone, rope, and sea air. When you leave, the streets of Cadiz shine under the evening rain, and lamplight trembles in the puddles. Your clothes are heavier now. The wet hem brushes your legs. Your boots sound different on stone, less crisp, more muffled. People pass with heads bent, carrying bundles under shawls or coats. A cart rolls slowly, wheels hissing through water gathered in the road. The harbour is hidden by mist, but you can smell it more strongly, broad and salty beneath everything else. The walk home after rain is quieter. Voices stay closer to doorways. The city seems to draw inward. You carry the yard with you again, but now the smell of cork is mixed with rainwater and wool. At home, if there is a dry place to hang your clothes, that is a comfort worth noticing. The body, chilled after steam and rain together, asks for warmth differently than after a hot, clear day. A meal warms the hands from within. Soup, beans, bread softened in broth, anything hot enough to send steam into the face. You hold the bowl and feel the heat enter the fingers that spent the day gripping wet tools. The smell of food replaces the yard for a little while. Not completely. The cork remains in the skin. But home has its own stronger claim in the evening. The rain continues outside. It taps on shutters and runs from roof edges. You may think of the covered stacks in the yard and hope the water is shedding properly. This is another quiet burden of work with materials, even when you are away. Some part of the mind checks conditions. Did the cover hold? Did the runoff miss the dry bark? Will the morning begin with trouble? Then sleep comes, because tiredness is larger than worry. By morning, the rain has passed, leaving the yard washed, damp, and full of small repairs. You arrive to find the covers heavy with water. They must be lifted carefully so the runoff does not spill onto the dry stacks. The ground is slick, and fine bark dust has become paste in the corners. The firewood must be checked. Some of it stayed dry enough. Some needs moving nearer warmth before it will burn well. The vat waits cold and patient, rain speckled along its rim. The 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler begins this day with recovery. Not rest, but recovery of order. Covers are shaken and hung. Boards are turned. Water is swept or guided away. Damp bark is separated from dry where the rain reached an edge. The work is slower before it becomes productive. You accept this because the yard must be made ready before the cork can be made ready. The air smells different after rain. Cleaner at first, then more complex as movement begins. Wet cork has a raw, open scent. Ash smells sour. Stone smells mineral and cool. Rope smells like old harbor water. When the fire finally catches, smoke rises thickly from fuel that is not quite dry, and everyone steps aside from its first stubborn cloud. Your eyes water, and you blink until the air clears. A damp morning makes boiling both easier and harder. The heat of the vat feels welcome against the chill. Steam blends naturally with the wet air, but fuel burns less cleanly. Footing is uncertain, and dry bark may not be as dry as you want. The cork boiler's task is to adapt without complaint. The weather has spoken. The yard answers. The first batch after rain enters the vat with a heavier sound, because the outer surfaces have taken on moisture. The bark does not resist quite like dry cork, but it carries its own damp chill into the water. The boil loses strength for a moment, then returns. You watch carefully. The timing may change. The feel may change. There is no rule today except attention. A thin fog of steam hangs low, refusing to rise quickly in the damp air. It curls around legs, boards, and stacks. You see the other workers through it as softened figures, moving with poles and hooks. The yard feels older in such weather, almost like a place from memory rather than a place of business. Yet the tasks remain exact, and exactness keeps the dreaminess from becoming confusion. The cork comes out pliant, but must be stacked where air can reach it. Damp weather slows drying. Too much closeness can trap moisture in ways that later cause trouble. So the planks are spaced more carefully, with small gaps where possible, and covers are used with judgment rather than habit. Cover too much, and the cork sweats. Cover too little, and another shower may undo the work. The day becomes a balance of breath and shelter. You feel how the job asks you to think like the material. Cork must be softened, but not sodden. Warmed but not scorched. Flattened but not crushed. Protected but not smothered. Every good result sits between excesses. The vat, the stack, and the weather all teach moderation. A cork boiler may not use that word, but he practices it with every batch. By late morning, the yard has regained its rhythm, though the rain has left a damp hush in the corners. The sounds are softer today. Footsteps do not scrape as sharply. Boards land with a duller note. The fire pops when moisture trapped in wood meets heat. Steam condenses on cooler surfaces and runs in thin lines down the wall. You touch the rim of a board and feel dampness there. The body works inside a world that is still drying. A merchant arrives with a coat dark at the shoulders from leftover drizzle. He looks at the covered stacks and asks questions about delay. The foreman answers. You keep working because the vat does not pause for conversation unless told. Still, you hear enough to know the concern. Orders, dates, quality, weather. These words circle above the labor, while below them the cork must still soften at its own pace. This is another pressure on the 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler. He works between natural time and commercial time. Trees grow slowly. Bark dries unevenly. Water heats gradually. Weather interrupts. Merchants count days, carts, and shipments. The boiler stands where those times meet, and his body absorbs the difference. He cannot make rain unhappen. He can only prepare the cork as well as conditions allow. The merchant leaves after a while. His boots sound clean compared with the workers' boots. The yard exhales again. Someone mutters that rain falls on ledgers too, though not enough to spoil the ink if the clerk is lucky. A few men smile. The line is gentle, not cruel. Working people often make room for small comparisons because they know every kind of labor has its own annoyances, though some are wetter than others. The day continues. The damp bark softens well once the heat steadies. The prepared stacks are watched closely. A little more space is made under shelter. A few planks are turned earlier than usual to help the surfaces release moisture evenly. These adjustments are small, but they show the craft. Boiling cork is not simply putting bark in water. It is managing change before, during, and after heat. At noon, the sun appears, pale at first, then stronger. Light touches the wet stones and makes them shine. Steam rises more freely. The yard brightens, and the men seem to brighten with it, though no one says so directly. You feel warmth on your shoulders that is not from the vat, and it changes the body's mood. The rain day is becoming a drying day. The meal is eaten in a patch of sun. Damp clothes begin to release their chill. Bread tastes better when the hands are warm again. You sit with your back to the wall and watch thin vapor rise from covered stacks as the sun reaches them. The whole yard seems to be breathing out yesterday's weather. You breathe with it, slowly, and for a few minutes the work feels less like resistance and more like repair. After the meal, the afternoon brings a cleaner heat, and the Cadiz Cork Boiler turns back to production with steadier footing. The ground is still damp in places, but no longer treacherous everywhere. The fire burns better with drier fuel. The water keeps a stronger boil. The bark waiting near the vat has been sorted and protected enough to behave well. You feel the difference immediately. The pole meets resistance, yes, but not chaos. The plank dips, rolls, and settles. The vat's voice deepens into a confident murmur. This is one of the satisfactions of experience, restoring rhythm after interruption. Weather disturbed the yard, but did not defeat it. Men moved covers, changed timing, adjusted stacks, managed fuel, and returned the process to order. No single action was grand. Together, they preserved the work. You stand in the steam and feel the calm that comes when a place regains its pattern. A cart arrives to collect finished pieces from earlier batches. Loading after rain requires care because wet streets can jostle cargo, and damp planks must not be trapped too tightly. The cart bed is checked, ropes are set, spacers or boards are arranged where needed. You help lift, feeling the material's weight shift as moisture remains within it. The prepared cork is not dry enough to forget the vat, but ready enough to move onward. The driver asks whether the road near the warehouse has drained. Someone says it has, mostly. Mostly is a common word in working life. It means enough to proceed, with attention. The cart leaves slowly, wheels pressing water from shallow puddles. You watch the load pass through the gate, and the sight brings the same quiet feeling as before. Work moving on, work becoming someone else's task. The afternoon light strengthens, then begins its slow turn toward evening. The yard smells of drying cork now, less bitter, more open. The stacks lose some surface shine. The boards under them darken where moisture has collected. You turn a plank and feel steam trapped beneath it rush into cooler air. It touches your wrist like a living breath, then disappears. A cork boiler's senses become fine because the work rewards fine noticing. Too wet, too hot, too curled, too long, not enough, almost ready. These judgments live close to the fingertips and nose. You do not need elaborate language to make them. You need attention. The trade builds a vocabulary of touch and smell that outsiders rarely hear, because much of it remains unspoken. Late in the day, the younger worker successfully judges a piece ready before being told. He hesitates, looks toward you, and you nod. Together, you draw it out. The edge holds. The curve has eased. He smiles very slightly, trying not to show too much. You let him have that quiet victory. Every worker needs moments when the material confirms what the hands are learning. The hardship of the job, then, includes the length of learning. A new man might think boiling cork is simple because the steps can be named quickly. But to do it well, day after day, through good bark, poor bark, rain, heat, hurry, delay, and tiredness, requires a knowledge that accumulates slowly. You cannot pour that knowledge into someone like water into a vat. It must soak in. As the day closes, the yard holds the softened gold of sun after rain, and every wet surface shines for a little while. You lower the fire with care. Coals settle. Steam thins. The last planks are stacked with more air than usual, because the day's dampness is still in them. Covers are folded nearby but not fully drawn, ready if clouds return. The yard has become a place of watchful compromise. Nothing is abandoned to chance, but nothing is smothered by worry either. Tools are cleaned more thoroughly after wet weather. Mud hides in corners of boards. Rope fibers hold damp. Metal hooks need wiping before rust gets too bold. You work through these tasks slowly, with the patience of a person who knows tomorrow begins inside tonight's order. The hook's handle feels smooth, swollen slightly from moisture. The pole is leaned where air can reach it. The scent of the evening is rich, wet stone drying, cork cooling, fire ash, salt wind, a faint trace of food from nearby houses. You breathe it in and feel the layers of the city gather around the layers of the work. Cadiz is not merely a backdrop. It enters the job through air, trade, weather, water, and road. The cork boiler is a city worker as much as a workshop worker. When you step into the street, the rain-washed stones hold the last light. Your boots leave damp marks that fade behind you. The air is cool enough to ease the face, warm enough not to chill the chest. You walk with other workers for a short distance and the conversation is low, wandering from weather to fuel to someone's cousin to nothing at all. Silence returns naturally between sentences. At home, drying clothes becomes part of the evening. A shirt is hung near warmth. Boots are set where they may not be perfect by morning, but better. Hands are washed and the basin water clouds with the day. You notice a new scrape along one finger, cleaned now and less angry than it looked in the yard. The body gives its small reports once the work stops. The meal is eaten and the room settles. Outside, the city continues in softened sound. Somewhere a cart still moves. Somewhere a door opens to late visitors. Somewhere a lamp is trimmed, and the smell of oil drifts into the street. You sit with tired hands open on your knees and feel how the day has passed through heat, rain, steam, and drying light. Then, slowly, the body begins to give itself over to sleep, and in the yard under boards and open air, the cork rests again, holding within it the memory of water, fire, and patient hands. The cork rests, and so do you. though the yard still holds the shape of the day in every damp board and darkened stone. The vat is cooling now, its iron no longer fierce, only warm in the way an old hearth stays warm after the room has grown dim. A last thread of steam rises from the stacked planks, curls once in the evening air, and disappears into the salt breath of Cadiz. You place the pole where it belongs, leaned safely against the wall, with its handle turned outward for the morning hands that will not come until after sleep. The hooks are wiped and set down, the ropes are coiled, the boards lie flat under the softened cork, and the weights keep their steady pressure without needing a word from anyone. Even the fire seems to understand the hour, settling under ash with a low red glow. The street beyond the gate has quieted, but not fallen silent. A wheel passes somewhere far off. A shutter closes. From the harbour comes the faint knock of rigging against a mast, slow and hollow in the dark. The smells of the day remain gently mixed around you: boiled bark, wet stone, smoke, salt, and the plain human warmth of work finished carefully. There is nothing more to hurry toward. The cork will cool in its own time. The planks will flatten as the night deepens. The tools will wait in their places, and the yard will keep its dark, patient order until dawn finds it again. For now, the 1870s CADIZ Cork Boiler steps away from the vat, carrying only the softness of tired hands and the quiet knowledge that the work has been left well. The gate closes behind you with a wooden sigh. The workshop is quiet now. The tools are where they belong, and so are you.